Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Witch with a Target by T.R. Cameron, Martha Carr, and Michael Anderle. Narrated by Megan Trout. Chapter 1. Cait had slept fitfully on the knowledge that trouble was brewing in the streets of her new city. Even though the marshals would not normally be a part of dealing with criminal organizations, except when lawbreakers interacted with the judges and facilities under their care, she felt like she was squarely in the center of the fracas between the dragons and the roses. That is not a good place to be. "Well, you definitely stuck your nose right in the middle of it," Asa observed from his position around her neck. Her partner had disguised himself as a silver dragon necklace with carved scales. His tiny wings remained folded along its body. His eyes stayed closed. She sighed and replied telepathically, "Guess I'm thinking loudly again." "Is that what you were doing? Thinking? First time. You lack experience. It's difficult, I know." "Shut it." The subway car lurched and she swayed, her grip on the metal bar that rose from floor to ceiling keeping her upright. She used the moment to survey the other passengers. There was a standard assortment of young professionals on their way to work, school-aged kids on the way to their version of work, and a number of tourists who had gotten an early start on their day's adventures. Cait was due at the police precinct on the far side of Chinatown in a half-hour, which was what occasioned her to take the normal subway rather than the magical one in the basement of the ubiquitous coffee shop chain. A stop on that transport probably also existed near her destination, but she didn't have the local patterns figured out yet, and the signage on Boston's light rail was far better. She chuckled inwardly. Need to get some magical librarian types in here to make it better. She checked her phone for the time, then slid it back into the inner pocket of her suit jacket. "It's going to be close." Asa snorted. "Like it matters. It's only Bradley. And seriously, does he know police everywhere around town?" "Seems like. I guess he's just good with people." "Well, that leaves you out." "You do wonders for my ego, buddy. Thank you for that." "I'm only holding up a mirror to your truth." She laughed, and the surrounding people avoided making eye contact. Great. They think I'm crazy. Although I guess I am communicating with a voice in my head. She spoke to Asa again. "No more classic Dr. Phil reruns for you. The last thing I need in my life is a sassy dragon throwing psychology jargon at me." "Sounds like someone's in denial." Cait looked down at the floor and suppressed a sigh. Continuing this conversation would only earn her more stares or avoidance. She'd done her best to fit in and be unobtrusive. Her wand bracelets were hidden farther up her arms than usual, so they wouldn't show on the train. Her jacket was buttoned to hide her shoulder holster and the pistol she carried. She'd been recognized once or twice from the video of Asa saving her from a long fall out of the building. After all this time, it was still making rounds. She hoped to remain as anonymous as possible to avoid more questions about her scaly partner. She twisted the pinky ring her sister Aisling had given her as the train hissed to a stop with a squeal of brakes. The doors slid open to the sound of an automatic announcement, and the normal exchange of bodies happened. Among the newcomers to the car were two hard-looking men with dark suits and Japanese features. She frowned and checked the transit map. As she suspected, the station was on the edge of the dragon's territory. "They look like street soldiers to you?" she asked Asa. "Definitely. Want me to burn them?" She'd expected the comment. Burning was her partner's first solution to every problem. Cait ignored it. "I've got a bad feeling about this, Asa." She watched the newcomers as they scanned the car, clearly looking for potential trouble. She covered her mouth and whispered the spell to amp up her muscles and senses, just in case. Coffee breath and oil from the car collided with the slight ozone smell from the electrical feed to the train. Before Asa managed to reply, the door connecting her train car to the one behind it banged open. Her eyes flicked toward it as two figures shoved their way through. Several of the nearest passengers flinched away. The street soldiers spun toward the new arrivals and drew short blades from under their coats. They weren't interested in hand-to-hand combat, though, and raised pistols they'd pulled from behind their legs, holding them at arm's length. Cait reacted instantly, creating force bubbles around both groups of men to lock them, and, hopefully, their bullets, away from the crowd in the car. Screams barraged her ears, so she had to shout, "U.S. Marshal! Everyone move to the front of the train, out of this car immediately!" People flowed around her as they followed her orders, but she kept her concentration on the locked-down combatants. Neither seemed interested in testing the shimmering shields that covered them. For a moment, the situation appeared salvageable. Then another pair appeared from behind the two intruders she'd captured. Cait recognized one of them instantly, as they'd met on a rooftop not too long before. "You!" she growled. The wizard grinned as if fate had given him a present. He flicked his wand and her shields shattered. Guns went off, and she slammed a force protection around herself, creating a barrier between the attackers and the retreating civilians. Both presumed dragon soldiers had rushed forward when her barrier dropped, and they fell to the gunfire, blood oozing from their abdomens. She dismissed drawing her pistol. Even though it was loaded with anti-magic bullets, the potential for a ricochet was significant. Despite her skill, she knew it would be wiser to wait until the car was empty of innocents. Cait hurled a blast of force magic with both hands. It slammed the two gun-wielders back into the other late-arriving magical, who was launching his own attack. His fireball struck the roof and spread out rather than punching through, setting the advertisements along each side of the car aflame. She snarled a curse and waved her left hand, using her wand bracelet to spill frost over the flames. With her right, she reached out telekinetically and grabbed the familiar wizard's wand. He was quick enough to solidify his grip, but her yank pulled him off balance. She darted ahead, carefully dodging the thrashing limbs of the two bleeding men in dark suits, and delivered a simple front kick. Her amped muscles sent him flying backward and upward. He crossed the 6 feet to the car's rear in only a moment. His head smacked off the metal, and he crumpled, falling forward onto his face with a satisfying crunch. She spun into a back fist, slamming her knuckles into the nearest pistol wielder's temple. He went down, dazed. The other wizard dispatched lightning at her, and she snapped up an extra force shield to defend against it, extending it to protect the fallen dragons. Her foe sustained the attack as he backed out of the car, followed by the gunman, who was still upright, who fired several rounds her way before leaving. They struck her shield and deflected off, most of their velocity lost. Didn't anticipate fighting a magical, which makes it all the less impressive that they brought along their own. Good tactics, but hardly fair. She must have let her thoughts slip again because Asa replied, "I don't think they're inclined to be fair. I wouldn't be in their position." She looked over her shoulder to verify no civilians remained in the car and said, "Jump out so you can watch over these people." The necklace slipped from around her throat and turned into the dragon as it fell toward the floor. By the time he landed, he was the size of a corgi and still growing. She hit the emergency button on her phone, and Sabrina instantly answered, "I'm here." Thank goodness for signal amplification in the tunnels. "Subway, gang fight, magicals involved. Got my location?" "I have it. I'll send backup." She looked down. "And ambulances. Multiple gunshot wounds. Yours?" "Neither giver nor a taker this time, but it's still early." The gunman she'd put down twitched, and Asa leapt into the air and landed on him, drawing a groan of pain. The dragon flicked out a clawed foot and knocked the man's weapon away from him and the men in black. "Good job, buddy. Keep an eye on them." He winked. "Call for help if you need it." "You know I will." With a brief pause to be sure her shields were fully reinforced, she opened the door and headed for the next car. Chapter 2. A barrage of magic met Cait as she climbed inside the car. She growled mentally. Bastards came in force today. Wonder what they had in mind other than ambushing dragons on the subway. Asa replied, "Perhaps everyone has decided to try to kill you? They probably would have shot at me first then." "Good point." Her shields held up against the sustained blast. When the electricity and force magic fell off, the magical taking a moment to switch tactics, She countered the attack. One gunman was still up, and she reached out with her telekinesis to rip his weapon away even as he pulled the trigger. The round went into the ceiling, punching through so a whistling sound filled her ears. She stepped forward and slammed down a wall of force, shouting for the civilians to get out of the car behind her. Before she could follow up her attack, the now weaponless human dashed back to another car, and the magical threw up his own shield as he did the same. She said to Aza, "I've got them on the run." "So you failed to capture them, you mean?" "You suck." "I'm happy to say that mine are still down." The wizard tried to get up. His head made a lovely ringing sound as I smacked it off the floor. "I don't think heads can ring. At least, not externally." "Whatever." Cait braced herself, opened the door to the next car, and darted through. The subway train still moved fast, lights flashing in the otherwise dark tunnel as she wove between the cars. She grumbled inwardly. The next car was also filled with civilians. She immediately summoned force shields to protect them as she ordered them out of the car. With a smile, she noted the back window showed only tracks, meaning her foes had run out of room to retreat. Their attacks smashed into her shields but failed to penetrate as the others escaped. When the area was empty of non-combatants, she called, "Deputy U.S. Marshal, put your wands and other weapons on the floor, lay on your stomachs, and put your hands behind your heads." A not insignificant part of her hoped they wouldn't listen, and they didn't. The two wizards threw opposite magics at her, fire and frost. She used both of her bracelets to summon a fused shield of those elements for protection. The way that the pair's gaze flicked past her made her think they might be waiting for reinforcements, and she advanced to the middle of the car to be further away from any surprise additions. Cait's eyes widened as the man whose gun she'd stolen pulled open his jacket. The parted garment revealed a bulletproof vest with grenades attached to it. He also had shoulder holsters hanging under each armpit and extracted both weapons in a smooth draw. She dove forward and rolled to avoid the shots, certain that if the roses had brought magical protection, at least one of the pistols would be loaded with anti-magic rounds. The blazing line of fire that drew itself across her calf as she tumbled confirmed that suspicion. Her body twisted involuntarily from the pain, and she was knocked up against the right-hand seats, narrowly avoiding smacking her head against a metal pole. Ringing indeed. Cait focused her power through both of her bracelets, calling up a force shield to block a renewed magical attack coming at her right, while sneaking her left arm around to throw the strongest burst of force she could manage at the man with the pistols. Her position caused the blast to strike him at an upward angle, and he flew up and back to slam into one of the subway car's windows. It shattered under his weight, and she thought he'd fall out for a second. Fortunately for him, and probably unfortunately for her, it didn't completely fall out of its frame and bounced him back into the car. He fell onto his face, groaning as his pistols slid away from his hands. Cait rose, extending her shield to cover her entire height, and snarled at the remaining pair. "Last chance. Put them down. Now." They responded, this time with electricity and shadow magic. She stuck with force, counting on her layered shields to protect her despite their magic not matching the magic of the incoming attack. She tried telekinesis again, but their wands didn't move. Must have used magic to lock them in their hands. Gotta remember that. Could be useful. She twisted to her left and launched a forceful burst into an unbroken window. It shattered, and before the shards could escape, she grabbed them with her magic and hurled them at her enemies. The sudden flurry of sharpened glass forced them to focus on their own defenses, and their magical barrage fell away. She used the momentary distraction to come close to hand-to-hand range, leading with a double burst of lightning in case their response to the glass fragments allowed her to find a way past their protective magic. The wizards managed to reassert their defenses in time to receive nothing more than superficial shocks from the lightning. They're good, I've got to give them that. But since that was only the start of her plan, it wasn't a problem. She snapped out a low kick at the one nearest, and he flicked his wand, putting a force barrier in front of it. Her leg stopped short, and he gave her a smug look of satisfaction. The expression turned first to alarm, then agony, as the handful of glass she'd kept hidden behind her back, suspended with force magic, flew at his face. The man hurled himself backward, but the shards still struck, and blood from his new lacerations splashed onto the wall. Confident now that she faced even odds, she turned to face the other, summoning a barrier to deflect his fire back at him. Cait moved toward him with slow steps, and he backed away at the same rate until his spine banged into the rear door. She met his gaze with hard eyes. "Last chance. What I have in store for you is way worse than what your friend got." It was an empty threat. She had nothing prepared, but he didn't know that. His loyalty was apparently greater than his common sense, though, because he snarled, pointed his wand, and sent a blizzard of needle-sharp icicles flying at her. She summoned a shield of ice, backed with fire. Not seeing her second level of defense, he predictably switched to fire, hoping to overpower her magic. Hers consumed his incoming power, and the tiniest trickle flowed into her, just like Sashura had said it might. Well, okay, that could be useful. Cait shot both of her fists out toward him, sending bursts of force at his head and feet, but he adequately defended both. She used her left hand to bathe him in lightning and stomped forward, forcing him to create a magical cocoon for protection. Her power kept him engaged when she stood before him, and vice versa. She switched to force magic with both hands, pressing him against the back of the car. He managed to keep his wand trained on her, but could do no more than maintain his shield as she drew her pistol and placed the barrel against his forehead. "Anti-magic rounds. Drop the wand, or you're done." His face twisted in hatred. He replied, "Do it, and you'll be dead in days. My people will see to it." Cait laughed. "Please. Rosetta cares about himself and no one else. There's absolutely no chance he'll lift a finger to avenge a roach like you." The wizard's teeth gritted against the strain of maintaining his defenses against her, but he didn't give. With a sigh, she lowered the barrel, pointed it at his shin, and pulled the trigger. The bullet slammed through their combined magics and into the bone, shattering it. She slapped his wand out of his hand as he screamed and went down. "Idiot." She turned to be sure no additional enemies had appeared while she dealt with the wizards. Forgotten on the floor of the car was the man she'd knocked into, but not quite through, the window. Grenade pins clattered on the metal as he yanked the lanyard that had secured them all, and their handles popped out. She had no idea what variety they were, and a sudden fear that they might hold toxic gas seized her. Cait called, "Asa, protect the civilians." His stress-filled reply, "What's happening?" passed unanswered as she wrapped the man in shields and did the same with herself. She twisted, blasted the rear door off its hinges, and turned back, ready to throw him out. The grenades detonated before she could, sending out a concussive force sufficient to slam the car to the side. With a shriek of metal, it disengaged from the rest of the train. She threw herself backward, counting on her shield to protect her from impact with the tracks. She only belatedly remembered that the Boston subway had a third electrical rail that supplied power to the system. She landed hard, and the car she'd escaped caught fire. Beside her, the rail sizzled. After a moment of waiting for the other shoe to drop and it failing to do so, she let her head fall back onto the track. "I'm okay. Morin, stop all trains on this route right now." Static was the only response. With a sigh, she rose, amped her speed, and started running in the direction of the departing train. What was left of it, anyway. She hoped no others would run her over while she sought a location with a functional connection. Well, that's a great way to start the day. Chapter 3. After seeing to the safety of the passengers on the train, Cait had left the situation in the hands of the police and portaled back with Asa to her apartment. She'd taken a sip of healing potion sufficient to deal with the superficial leg injury, and made a mental note to get one to keep at home in addition to the one she carried at all times. "Now that my mother's making them, hopefully the price shouldn't be too high," she snorted inwardly. Probably have to do a bunch of chores around the village. Maybe I can pay Brianna to do them for me. She showered, put on a different suit since the one she'd initially chosen for the day had a large tear in the back of the leg, and portaled back to the Moakley. She arrived in the office in time to catch everyone leaving, which brought her first minutes at the new job to mind and made her laugh. "Where are we going?" she asked as she turned and followed her colleagues. "Big meeting of all the fancy people. I'm not invited, so keep your microphone open for me," Sabrina called from her desk. She gave the other woman a thumbs up and jogged to catch up with the others. Chief Simon Levitt confirmed in the elevator. "Big meeting, as she said." "About?" Garrett Bradley, her frequent partner and the unit's most proficient investigator, laughed. "You, probably. I'm guessing the mayor wants to discuss how you're planning to pay for all the damage you did to government property this morning." Clement Austin, her other recurring partner, slapped Garrett on the shoulder. "I'm sure it's not that. More likely, they want to talk about her body count." Aza was only a glint of silver visible at the unbuttoned throat of her shirt as she tucked the necklace under her clothes. He laughed and observed, "Seriously, I like these people." Cait said to him, "They suck, you suck, and I'll go out on a limb and say that the mayor probably sucks too." Out loud, she said, "You all are hilarious. Ever think about retiring from the Marshals and starting a second career in stand-up comedy? If you did, the chief and I could actually hire some qualified co-workers." Simon chuckled. "If you're trying to get me on your side so I'll help you pay for the damages, not going to happen, Keane." She sighed. "Go to Boston, they said. It'll be great, they said." When they reached the outside, an SUV was waiting for them. Clement slid behind the wheel, and she climbed into the back seat with Bradley. Simon twisted in the passenger seat and remarked, "Seriously, though, big meeting to discuss whatever is going on between the Roses and the Dragons. I woke the rest of the city's top officials up last night after you called me, and they did their own looking around this morning. Apparently, they saw something that jibed with what you said, hence this hastily organized gathering." Cait nodded. "I don't know what that jerk was planning to do with all those grenades, but it seemed like more than just a hunting party for dragon soldiers." Clement observed, "They're probably feeling pretty badass after killing Yoshino." She winced internally, even though the woman's death couldn't be laid at her feet. Still, I was there, and I wish I'd thought it all through a little better. I'm sure Saito and Kono do too. Hell, I might be on their hit list now. The idea engendered a scowl that reached her lips, and Garrett said, "What?" She shook her head. "Just thinking these are dangerous times for Cait Keane here in Boston." He laughed. "Well, it is fair to say you've achieved a certain notoriety with the underworld since your arrival." She did manage to suppress the sigh his wording summoned as she thought of the favors she owed the man, whose name she still didn't know, for borrowing his device to get into the Martins' vault. And I don't even want to think about those Rosden artifacts, or whatever they were. She shuddered. "Great, now I'm thinking about it." Aza said, "And you're broadcasting those thoughts all over the place. Maybe try to take a nap? It would benefit us both." The car pulled up in front of Boston's City Hall. The structure was alternately hailed as a masterpiece of architecture and one of the ugliest buildings in the world, designed decades ago in something called the brutalist style. She'd gotten all that from reading up on the city before coming, but seeing it with her own eyes just reaffirmed the truth of what she'd read. It was spectacular, but also somehow hideous. A man in a black suit waved them to the curb, and Austin tossed him the car's key fob so he could park it. They headed inside, and she was glad to find the interior far more welcoming than the exterior, at least after they passed through the security cordon. Cait spotted an area with food stands and asked enthusiastically, "Is that coffee I see?" Simon shook his head. "No time. We'll get lunch upstairs eventually. We're already a slow elevator away from being late." Fortunately, they entered one that moved at average speed and made it into the conference room with a minute to spare. A large rectangular table with a number of people gathered around it dominated the space, and an empty place at the head awaited the meeting's organizer. She recognized Eduardo Val, the leader of the local AET unit, and exchanged a wave. He made finger pistols and shot them at her. Clearly, my morning's adventures precede me. Aza said, "Even if they didn't, it's always a good bet you've been up to some sort of trouble." She scoffed. "You know what, Scaleface?" The arrival of Paul Andrews and Natalie Hood interrupted her before she could finish. They exchanged greetings, and Natalie leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" Cait nodded. "Healing potions are wonderful." The other woman met her eyes. "Mentally, too? Some harsh stuff from what I hear." Warmth trickled through her at Natalie's concern. She smiled. "Yeah, all good. That's far from my first fight, although I will admit I've never done it on a moving subway train before." "Now you can check that box off your U.S. Marshals bingo card." Cait laughed out loud as the other woman moved away, then shook her head and sat beside Garrett. He said, "I think rules prohibit fraternizing with the PDA." "I'm not fraternizing." "Okay, flirting," she snorted. "Keep your lascivious fantasies to yourself, Bradley." He chuckled. "What's the fun in that?" "I'll tell your wife." He looked shocked and ran a finger across his lips to zip them. The entrance of Boston's mayor banished the jovial atmosphere. Stephanie Moore was an institution in the city, having held the top position for more than a decade, and accomplished an impressive number of good things. As if to balance that part of her personality, she also had a reputation as a hothead. Cait had imagined it was one of those reputations that effective women get because of their gender. But the lightning in the woman's eyes as she took her seat caused her to reassess that conclusion. The mayor refrained from speaking until her aide was settled beside her. "Okay, I'm guessing all of you already know each other, so we don't have to do anything stupid like introducing ourselves. Deputy Marshal Keane, excellent work protecting the civilians on the subway this morning. If it's possible to do so in a less destructive manner in the future, the city would appreciate that." She nodded, and when the woman turned away, Keane muttered, "So I guess everybody has a comment to share." In her ear, Sabrina whispered, "It's all over social media. Some great video, too, especially of Aza. I think a fan club could be a possibility. For him, I mean, not you." Cait focused her attention back on the woman at the head of the table as she resumed speaking. "Here's what we know. Yoshino Kyoka was apparently killed in front of an abandoned building where she was hosting a meeting. We can assume a power vacuum now exists at the top of the dragons." Several people nodded. "The Roses are obviously still antisocial scumbags, as our morning adventure demonstrated, so no change there." She turned to a man across the table from Cait. "What is the perspective of the anti-gang division, Commissioner?" A sandy-haired and severe middle-aged man in a police dress uniform with badges and medals on the breast replied, "We've seen increased activity across the board. Both of the big players, but the small ones as well. Even those that aren't aligned with one of the two. It's a stage set for trouble. I'd call it a powder keg waiting for a spark, but that suggests some possibility it might not explode. A powder keg with a lit fuse of indeterminate length is probably a better metaphor." "So, too late to stop it before it starts. Got you. This morning's activities seem to suggest they're fine with collateral damage, which is concerning." Val nodded. "I've reviewed all the videos. The grenades were clearly incendiary, meaning these people were loaded up to do some serious harm. The dragons tend to use public locations as their offices and meeting spaces, so my team judges it very likely the Roses were headed to one with the intent of killing both dragons and civilians." In her ear, Sabrina said, "Oh, just so you know, the subway thing's not as big a deal as everyone's making it out to be. That part of the line needed work anyway, and they've rerouted the trains. Everything's back on schedule. Don't let anyone give you crap about it." Cait tuned back into the mayor in time to hear her next question. "What about picking up Rosetta, letting him cool his heels in jail for a while? Even if we can't make anything stick, it might reduce the heat on the streets a little." no one mentioned such a move would lie right on the line of legality. Instead, Paul said,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?